eldest son, who is in the audience today, has just turned 13. He is probably squirming right now because I've mentioned he is here. Now, because I have a teenager in the house, news stories about teenagers have been catching my eye. This may not be a surprise to you, but have you noticed these stories are not overly complimentary about these particular human beings? According to the media, teenagers are all at it, drinking, smoking, vaping, and various other activities, which I won't mention here today, given this is a PG-rated crowd. This got me thinking, and I started to do a bit of investigating into the concept of a teenager and brand. Indulge me while I share a brief history of teenagers with you. Did you know that the word teenage is actually quite a recent invention, with the word only being officially coined in the 1920s? We are in the 2020s. This is 100 years later. If you look at the tragic love story of Romeo and Juliet, Romeo was 16 or 17, and Juliet only 13. When I found out their ages, this added an extra dimension to the story for me. In my readings, I was amazed to learn of the huge amount of changes that take place in the teenage brain. The teenage brain only reaches adult size at age 25, and yet we're allowed to drink and drive at age 18. Teenage brain development results in increased risk-taking behavior, heightened sensitivity to rewards, and strong emotional responses. Any of this sound familiar? This reminded me of my last year in high school, when one Saturday evening I was desperate to go to a party. My parents, not so much. There is no ways you're going to that party, young lady. My teenage brain got resourceful, and I waited until they went to sleep, and I climbed out of my bedroom window and I snuck off down the road to meet my friends. When I got home at 2 a.m., my parents were none the wiser. I'm also now ashamed to say that this was not a one-off event. Let's be honest, being a teenager is complex. You are too old to be treated like a child, but too young to be treated like an adult. You are navigating the newly found world of cliques and trying to find your place in that world. Being a teenager is like being on a roller coaster with supreme highs and deep lows. There is the upside of the roller coaster, the carefreeness, the lack of responsibility, and the excitement of developing one's freedom. But there's also the downside of the roller coaster, the angst, the painful breakups, and let's not forget the pimples. Many of us never even want to think about our teenage years, let alone think that anything good could have come out of them. But I started to wonder if there's something we've overlooked here. What if there's something about teenagers, the pushing the boundaries, the being passionate about ideas, the looking at the world through fresh eyes that we lose as we grow up? I think there's something unique and brilliant and wonderful that teenagers have that I've lost as I've aged, and maybe you have too, and it relates to brand. Just like the word teenage, the word brand has only been around in the last 150 years or so. And prior to that, it relates to farmers branding their animals with distinctive marks, which, if you think about it, is what the new, more glamorous definition of brand refers to. It's your mark on the world. A personal brand is a unique combination of qualities that makes you you. It's a look and feel and communicates your values and identity to the world. Of course, there are teenagers out there who don't know who they are and are still figuring it all out, and are having to figure it all out on social media. But let's face it, there are plenty of articles out there talking about how difficult teenagers are, which to me strongly implies they know who they are, what they stand for, and have a brand. It slowly starts to hit me that maybe the teenage me knew a whole lot more about who I wanted to be than the 50-year-old Louise does. And I'm not just referring to jumping out of bedroom windows to go to parties. So what was my brand as a teenager? I wanted a degree, a career, to travel, to live in London, to read books that excited me, to get up on stage and act. I also wanted to learn to solve the Rubik's Cube, but that was too hard. That's what mattered to me as a teenager. Your list may be completely different. Let's take a moment, close your eyes, and revisit who the teenage you wanted to be. But don't revisit the pimples. You've probably gathered by now that I grew up in the 80s, and back then, things were conservative. Luckily for me, my brothers and I were given exactly the same opportunities by my parents. But it was outside of my family that was more of a problem, and I kept on bumping up against people who had different ideas of what I should be doing with my life and loved to tell me, university, career, you, female, pointless. This was the 80s. My rebellious teenage spirit and strong sense of identity said, hell no. Do you remember that rebellious teenage spirit you used to have? I signed up for university, hefty student loans, and blazed my trail. It's interesting that when you have a fully developed adult brain, which is the end goal of being a teenager, you start to lose some of that fire and brand. I started to listen to society's voices and constraints, and I slowly put my teenage dreams away. I left university and became an accountant. And now I find myself mother of a teenager and surrounded by teenagers in my family, and I'm immersed in their vibrant energy. But it has made me pause and slowly start to shift my thinking about what is important to me. How can I get the bland out of my brand? I have been lucky in my career, and I use my platform to help other women rise in the workplace through sponsorship and mentoring programs. I live in the city I've always wanted to live in, London. Tick. I've traveled the world. Thanks to Audible and Kindle, I've resurrected my love of reading, and I'm slowly starting to conquer my middle-aged fears of getting back up on stage. And here I am today, speaking to all of you. I've also learned to solve the Rubik's Cube earlier this year. I have been taught by my teen. It did take me a very long time to learn, and he still thinks I solve it like a snail. But hey, I can do it. I have discovered there is a thing, the UK Rubik's Cube Championship. We are even thinking of entering, me, in the much slower seniors category, of course. Everything I've shared with you today is because I truly believe that no one knows your brand like the teenage you. I'm not asking that you revisit the angst, the heartbreak, or the pimples, but revisit the carefreeness, the rebellious spirit, the slight recklessness that made you pursue your dreams unabashedly, the way you were before the world got too loud. That teenage part of you, me, all of us should never be put to rest. Imagine if we could access the upside of the roller coaster, but with our adult brain. Now, can I ask you all to stand up, turn to each other, high five, and say, let's go. Whew. What an amazing crowd. Thank you. Let me tell you, I'm really hoping that when I get off the stage, my 13-year-old will come up to me, do a high five, and say, Mum, you have slayed it. Thanks.